welcome to my booktube.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over my March TBR. So I am really excited about this video for multiple reasons. First, Elliot Brooks over at her channel Elliot Brooks is hosting her first readathon, and she's the reason that I even knew that booktube existed and that there was this community where people just talk about books, which also eventually led to me making my own channel. So her readathon is an Animal Companions and Mythological Creatures readathon. I will link her video down below so you can go check out how it works and all of that. I will quickly go over it myself. Also, the way she set it up is a bingo board, but instead of getting bingo you want to get magic. There's 8 spaces for all of the different types of mythical creatures, and she has it broken down to 4 categories of those, so you can have 2 spots for animal companions or mythological creatures from the sky, 2 from the sea, 2 from land, and 2 from beyond, which would be like deities, demons, or other things that kind of fit in that sort of category. It's also supposed to have an all-around the world aspect to it, so there are 2 spaces for Indigenous inspired fantasy, 2 for African inspired, 2 for Asian inspired, and 2 for South American inspired fantasy as well. There's only 1 space for European fantasy, but that's pretty easy to come by. There's also additional spots for other types of representation, so there's 2 spots for LGBTQ, 2 for disability representation, and 2 for mental health. There's also 2 spots for middle grade / young adult and 2 spots for adult. So there are 2 different boards that you can choose from. She said that you can play 1 or both. So for this TBR video, at the beginning there are going to be a few books that I really want to get to this month, but then the rest of the list are books that I'm going to pick up either based on which squares I've been able to complete and check off, or mood reading wise, because I just want to be a bit more flexible with my reading. As much as I do like to plan, I also am a bit of a mood reader too, so I want to make sure that it works really well and I'm meeting myself in the middle. Some of the books on here I'm just not going to get to, but that's okay. And finally, before we get into my TBR, I also do want to say that if you're having a hard time looking up what books to read for the prompts, in the description box of Elliot's video has an attachment to a Google Doc which has tons and tons of books in there. That's where I started because I knew some of the books that I wanted to read or carry over from February that I knew would meet some of the prompts, but I also have tons of books on my shelves that I haven't read, so I wanted to see which ones of those would meet some of the prompts so I could finally catch up on my very, very large physical TBR. For the structure of my video, just to let you know, I'm going to talk about my TBR, but I'm also going to recommend some other books that might meet some prompts for you guys. I'm really excited for this readathon for multiple reasons, but mostly because it's about animal companions and mythological creatures, which is one of my favorite aspects of fantasy, especially on the animal companion side, because there's that relationship between the character and the creature, and it's just fills my heart. I love it. So I'm super stoked about this, but the first book that I have is not a part of this readathon because I don't think that it fits any of the prompts. But through Elliot's channel, I came across Vish's channel. I think it's Books with Vish. I'll link her channel down below so you can go check it out, but she's been doing buddy reads for every month of the year, and I think she has them determined for up until the end of April or May, and it's really cool because she lists some books that she's interested in reading and then people can vote on Discord, and so I joined the Discord group and I'm super excited. And so the book that she has picked for March is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I don't know all that much about the plot of this book, but I've heard that it's absolutely beautifully written, and I haven't read too many books that are really flowery or just beautiful prose, so I really wanted to give that a try, and that's why I'm picking up this one, and also because I just want to be a part of that community and meet other booktubers and talk to other people who are reading these books. But all I know about the plot of this book is that there's a guy who finds a book on his life and is trying to find out more about that. And that's all I know. So I'm pretty excited to go into it, mostly blind, but I've just heard wonderful things, so I definitely want to give that book a try. The next book that I have is also a buddy read. This one is with Elliot Brooks and her friend Jessie May from the channel Jessie May, and they're reading The Bone Ships in the month of March. This is by RJ Barker. I also don't remember too much about what this one's about, but this does meet some of the prompts for the readathon this month. This is an adult fantasy book, and the mythological creature is from the sea. I'm just really into bone magic. I also think that's like the new trend right now is lots of books about bones and bone magic and stuff like that, or necromancy. So yeah, I'm really into that. I'm really intrigued by this. I know when I read All the Stars and Teeth last year, that checked off that for me. And it was the first book that I read that had taken place on the sea, and it was something that I wanted more of, so I think I'll probably get that in this one. Following talking about All the Stars and Teeth, I'm very excited to be picking up the sequel and the last book in this duology, which is All the Ties in Fate by Adeline Grace. I'm so excited to get back with these characters. I really enjoyed them the first time around, and I enjoyed the magic, and the world itself is just so vibrant and beautiful, and the storyline progressed really quickly, so I imagine that this book will be a lot of the same, and I'm here for it. I'm really excited. This is a new release. I think it just came out like the 4th of February, so I've been holding it off because I really wanted to read it in March. For the readathon though, this checks off the boxes for C and young adult. The next book that I'm reading is going to be Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson. This book is written by an Indigenous Canadian author, and so I had to include that into the readathon as well. I picked this up a couple months ago at the bookstore here, and it just sounds really interesting. This would meet the prompt for, I believe, it would be young adult because the main character is a teen. This is really cute. It says their animal companion would be their flatulent pit bull baby killer, but now she's dead, so that could count as the beyond because it's a ghost. And it says also ravens have begun to speak to him even when he's not stoned. So also potentially Sky, and this also of course meets the square for Indigenous inspired as well. The next book that I have is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. The cover is beautiful, which is what originally drew me to it. This is also a new release that I think was released around the beginning of the year. I can't really remember. But the story itself sounds really intriguing, and so does the magic. This one would check off the squares for young adult and beyond, because I believe the creatures are potentially demons. Also would meet the square for African-inspired fantasy as well. I think that's it for the books that I definitely want to get to this month, because I also have tons of other books that I'm either carrying over from February or continuations of series that I really want to read, so we'll get into those. If you watched my TBR for the last 2 weeks of February, because I made it so late, you'll know that I most likely didn't expect to finish Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. I most certainly did not. I am only a quarter of the way through, so I still have about 600 pages to read. Yeah, I'm on page 208 and it's 799 pages. So this one would meet the requirement for adult fantasy, mental health, or beyond, so it would work for any of those squares. I'm definitely going to count this if I finish it in March, because I think 600 pages is still enough of the book for me to be able to consider it for this prompt, so I think that's fair. So I will be carrying over this book into March. Another book that I'm carrying over that I didn't have a chance to get to is The Time of Contempt by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the second book in the Witcher series, so the first 2 books before the series are all short stories, and this one is the second book of the actual long-standing series. This would meet adult fantasy, European inspired, and oh gosh, it could meet creatures for sea, land, or sky, maybe even beyond, depending on which book in the series you pick up, because Geralt, the main character, is a witcher, which means he's a monster hunter, so I don't know what creatures we're going to encounter in this one, so I don't know exactly what prompts that would work for, but I'm really excited to continue with the series. I've really been enjoying it so far. I have tons of series that I'm in the middle of right now, so I'm not too fussed about finishing any of them anytime soon, because I know some of them are going to be going on for quite some time. So speaking of series that I'm reading and potentially finishing, I'm also carrying over The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in the Mistborn trilogy, the first era of Mistborn, and I haven't even started it this month. I had a feeling I probably wasn't going to get to it in February, so surprise, it's carrying over to March. This would meet adult fantasy. I think it could also check off mental health and then creatures for land or maybe beyond. I feel like it would also count towards. So yeah, tons of options for which prompts I want this one to check off. Love Vin so much, and I want to continue the series. I'm just really nervous for this last book, which is why I didn't pick it up yet. I think I really should pick it up in March, but we'll see. Another series that I'm continuing is the book after the Poppy War. I'm going to be reading The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. I finished the Poppy War last month and it was so good. It was really, really good. I loved the story. I really like our main character. I know some people hate her. I really adore Rin. I think she's faced with some things that might not always make the best decisions, but I mean, nobody's perfect, so I don't expect my main characters to be perfect either. This would meet the prompts for adult fantasy, Asian-inspired, mental health, and I believe the mythological creatures would be considered beyond, or maybe sky, because her deity is a phoenix, so definitely lots of options for this one. I really do want to pick it up. So some other books that I'm hoping to get around to for the readathon or sometime soon I have on here. I know this is a ridiculous amount of books to expect myself to read. I know I'm not going to read them all, but in case I'm mood reading and want to pick up something else, I also have The Crown of Feathers by Nikki Palpretto, and I have been wanting to read this for a really long time. It's been on my shelf for probably close to a year and I still haven't read it, so this would certainly be really good for this readathon. I think this meets the prompts for young adult and sky, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, I'd really like to be able to get to this one, but looking at the size of all of these books, I don't think I will unless I swap something else out for this one. I'm going to put it down there as an honorable mention. Another book that I'd like to pick up is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, and I don't remember all of the prompts that this one falls under. I think it's adult and LGBTQ. I don't remember exactly what creatures either, but there's monstrous constructs, so maybe that counts as beyond for the mythological creatures. I'm not sure, but I've heard that this is a really good book, and again, bone magic, of course I'm intrigued. So in case I need something light and easy and really fun in the middle of all of these mostly bigger books that I have this month, I also really want to pick up volume 4 of The Rat Queens. I haven't picked up a volume of this series in quite a few months now, and it is so funny. It's like a D&D-esque type story with hilarious female lead characters. This would certainly meet representation for LGBTQ and maybe mental health, because some of the characters struggle through some things. It really just depends on whose backstory we're getting in this one. And I mean, D&D-esque style, they're going to encounter tons of different creatures, so I don't know what creatures we have in this one, so I don't know exactly what prompt it's going to meet, but I know this is going to be a hilarious and really fun read. So I'm going to put it up here because I really do want to get to this one this month, and it doesn't take very long to read those ones, and they're so fun. Another one I'm going to put as an honorable mention for something that's on my mind is the next volume of Monstrous. So I read volume 1, but I haven't read volume 2 yet. So we have this little girl who I think is I think she's kitsune, and then they have a little cat as a companion, and there's tons of strange creatures and monsters in here, so this would certainly meet multiple prompts as well, and the art in this is just beautiful. It's been quite a while since I read the first one, so I'd really like to get to this one, but again, this TBR is massive. I think I finished 4 books in the last 2 weeks of February. Hopefully I can get at least between 6 and 8 of these books read this month. That would be ideal. I've also been listening to audiobooks on 2 times speed, which has really cut my listening time down. And I mean, it really depends on the narrator on how fast I like to speed it up, because sometimes if it's too fast, it just makes me really anxious the whole time and it's not as exciting. But yeah, so this is it for everything that I'm hoping to get to this month. There might swap out with one another. I'm also going to go over some books that I have on my shelves that I would recommend if there's something that you want to pick up, if you're looking for some recommendations as well. So I will be turning the camera and showing you books on my shelves because I don't want to put more books on this chair. Okay, so 2 other books with mythological creatures would be All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace or Fireborn by Rosaria Munda. They are both young adult fantasy books. This one would have mermaids and other sea creatures, and this one obviously has dragons, so there's sea and sky in both of these books. I also really enjoyed both stories, so I'd highly recommend these in case you're looking for anything to meet those prompts. We also have the Shadow of the Fox trilogy by Julie Kagawa. These are the first 2 books of the series. This would meet the prompts for young adult and land and beyond. And they also meet the prompt for Asian inspired. I'm also considering getting the 3rd book as something that I might add to my list this month, but it really depends on how my reading month goes and which prompts I need. But yes, these are both phenomenal. I really like both of the main characters, and they're just really fun to follow. I liked the 1st book a lot better, but middle book syndrome is a thing that happens, and I've heard that the ending of the trilogy is phenomenal. So if that's something you're interested in picking up, these are options also. So I read both of these books last year. We have A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow and The Weight of Our Sky by Hannah Elkoff. These are both young adult fantasy books. So they would meet the prompts for that. And then this one has sirens, so mermaids, so it would meet mythological creatures of the sea. And this one would cover mental health and beyond. I feel like she has a djinn that's haunting her. They're both really good stories, and I liked the main character about both. Up here on this shelf, I have The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. So if you are on any book of the series, this would cover adult fantasy and mythological creatures, at least for land. But I've only read up to this book, I think is where I'm at right now. Oh yes, I guess Creatures from Beyond also, because there's like the dark one. I don't know exactly what they are, but yeah, that would count as well. And then we also have The Hobbit, and I have The Fellowship of the Ring too, so of course those have dragons, pardon my plant, and mythological creatures, so this would count for adult fantasy. So when it comes to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, this would count for land, sky, water, or sea, and beyond, just because there's so many creatures that you can encounter in the story, so those are definitely options as well. I'm sure everyone's heard of these series, but I figured I may as well mention them. And this is my Brandon Sanderson shelf. Sorry, my one plant looks really sad. For the Stormlight Archive, I haven't read these 2 books yet, but the first book, I know, the first book is The Way of Kings, and I'm currently reading that right now, and that would cover mental health, adult fantasy, and creatures for land, but I'm sure the rest of the books probably incorporate much of the same, and maybe even more. I haven't got there yet, so I can't say for sure. I haven't read Warbreaker yet, but the rest of the Mistborn trilogy would cover adult fantasy, and it would count as creatures for land and beyond, depending on which creature. And then also Skyward and Starsight would count as creatures for beyond, because there's aliens, because this is his young adult sci-fi series. So I read all of these last year, and I really, really enjoyed them. So these are 2 books that I have on my shelves that I haven't read and really want to get to. This is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon and Peace and Turmoil, which is Elliot Brooks's book. This one would have, I think it has dragons and other land creatures in there too, and is adult fantasy. This is also adult fantasy. Has a dragon, so that would cover sky creatures, and I think this also has LGBTQ representation. So yes, would definitely recommend if these are books that you want to pick up. I know that they were on her Google Doc list, so definitely check them out and then let me know what you think, because I still need to read them. And of course, we also have A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. My first 2 books I lent to a friend, so that's why they're not here. But they definitely have dragons, so sky and adult fantasy, and I think would also touch on mental health depending on the character you're following. Amazing series. I really, really enjoyed them. Yeah, really good books if that's another one that you want to get into. Okay, we also have Legendborn by Tracy Dion and The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So Legendborn is a young adult fantasy and touches on grief and loss, so that would be mental health. And also the creatures would be considered from beyond. For the Poppy War, I know I went over this when I talked about the next book that I'm reading, which is The Dragon Republic. Yeah, this one would touch on adult fantasy, mental health, and the mythological creature is from the sky or beyond, whichever one you would like to count it for, because it is also a deity. And of course, there's absolutely no way that I would leave the Locked Tomb trilogy. So we have Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Amazing books. Amazing. I love them so much. In case you followed my reading vlogs, you absolutely saw these ones coming. This is adult fantasy. It is set in space, so the mythological creatures would be considered from beyond, and it has LGBTQ representation, and Harrow the Ninth has mental health representation as well. So phenomenal books. I highly, highly recommend you pick these ones up if you're interested. But yes, I certainly could not leave these ones out of the video. They're amazing. I love them. And And finally, the last series that I do want to bring up is from... Hi, kitten. Anyway, is from my other shelf across the room. So this is the Wild Magic Quartet. It follows after the Song of the Lioness Quartet, and then this quartet is afterwards. They're all by Tamora Pierce. They all take place in the same realm, but this series is amazing because it has mythological creatures from land, sky, sea, and beyond, and it has animal companions. She has multiple animal companions. Her wild magic is amazing. I love this series so much. This is a middle grade, so it's a really easy, quick read. I think they're all less than 300 pages. Yeah, this one's like 290 some pages, but as you can see, the books are really short and the font is really big, so they could be read in one sitting. But they're so fun. They're very fast-paced. There's found family, there's training tropes, tons and tons of things that I absolutely enjoy about this series, so I highly recommend them if you haven't read them. This one, in the first book, she starts off with her animal companion that's a pony, but she also speaks with wolves, and then wolf speakers a bit more of the focus of the second book. Pardon the mess on this. I've had this book since I was a kid. I spilled something on it a long time ago. This one's the Immortals, so you can tell she sees some other creatures, and then there's also a dragon. So yeah, this series is so good and so cute, and I fell in love with this when I was like 12, and I still read them when I'm sick. Alright, I've squished them all on one shelf. But yeah, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. I am very much looking forward to doing this readathon. Let me know if you're participating in the readathon, what books you're reading. I'm definitely really intrigued. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts without spoilers, of course, because I obviously haven't read them yet. I appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day. Bye!